Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AutoGuide Show. This week, Kyle's in another fancy German car. Nissan is throwing a Hail Mary, and Lewis Hamilton wants to do something pretty darn cool. But first, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you order the right thing. All the parts you need at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love. Okay, welcome back. So the biggest story of the week, pretty easily, is that sort of out of nowhere, Nissan and Infiniti co-released a release, I guess, basically
Yeah.
stating what they're going to do over the next 3 to 4 years, and even a little beyond that in the release, to try to, as they say, right the ship, turn it around, get it going. There's been executive changes. There's another one coming pretty much right now, I think, in North America. There's failed mergers. We know their products are pretty stale. They need money. there's a lot going on there. We know the Rogue is getting a PHEV next year, or this year, I guess, like the 26 is getting it.
Mm-hmm.
But what surprised me is we also knew the Rogue was due to be completely overhauled into a new model. We figured it would be next year. And it will. And it's going to have a plug-in, but it's not going to be this plug-in. They're going to use Nissan's e-Power, their third generation, they say, and we never got much of the first two. So the Mitsubishi drive unit is going to be there for a year, and then they move to the new one because they like their e-Power, from how they describe it, and I assume it's going to be in the Rogue since it was in that same paragraph, is it's going to be like the Ram Charger. It's going to be a 1.5 liter generator that juices up the battery and the electric motor when needed, and the electric motor powers the wheels. So, yeah, so
It's a weird one. But I wonder if maybe this approach of doing the Mitsubishi thing for a year and then doing their own is it might have anything to do with Mitsubishi wanting to go elsewhere and kind of split from Nissan. I saw a story about that elsewhere this week about maybe Foxconn, which was a potential buyer for Nissan, maybe wants Mitsubishi. And then it's like, oh, well, you can't really use their plug-in system if they're no longer in the alliance. So maybe it's that. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know either. But like, for what they're going for, like, this would be many years in the making to R&D this, because like I said, I mean, it is heavy, like I said, but the reason I find it's the future is because, like, the Volt, which was so ahead of its time, there's a way longer range. So you could be an EV probably 90% of your drive, and then the odd time when you do these trips that everyone says they need to buy a gas car for once a year, it's good to go. Or if you're just busy and you couldn't charge it between and whatnot. So
yeah,
I mean,
I can already do that with the RAV4. Most people's daily stuff can handle with a RAV4 plug-in. But
yeah, so the big one, well, the Rogue's the big one, but the one that kind of was the lead of this story is the Leaf Gen 3 is going to come this year, they made it sound like, and it is going the way all cars seem to these days, and it's going to be a crossover. But as I said in my video, I hate that cars keep going to crossover, but this is one that totally makes sense because EVs, SUVs, or crossovers, or what you want to call them, that's the sweet spot of the market, and there aren't too many ones in the Crosstrek Taos size, and that's what it looks like this would be. So if they can get the price to undercut all the, the Mach-E's and the Ioniq 5s and all that, and still deliver decent range, and if they give it all-wheel drive to have an advantage over, say, the Nero, it could be a good vehicle. And I think, like, the current Leaf car isn't like it's sporty, so who cares if it's jacked up a bit and has some body cladding. So that's still just a little bit of what the news was. So the Pathfinder we knew was getting refreshed this summer. So they confirmed that, and I would almost bet my entire net worth that it's gonna get the 2-liter turbo and the 9-speed because the Murano and the QX60 already have it. So I'm sure that's a thing. Then they also mentioned that there will be an off-road focused EV SUV, which kind of like what we just said with the potential generator Rogue is, if they do that and they do it successful, again, they could be kind of pushing into a new segment. I don't know if we're ready for it, but like, you have the Hummer EV, but this would be very different priced and size and weight.
It's going to be the Xterra.
Yeah, I mean, the picture in the silhouette, like, it looks like there's an Xterra back there. And then
Sweet.
they also said there's going to be another EV that slots, I think, between the Leaf and the Aria, or is it below the Leaf? I can't remember what the exact wording was, but there's another, or maybe that was just a gas SUV.
Micra.
That was it. It was it. Yes, that
Oh.
was. It was a micro-sized SUV is coming, but they didn't. But it's not going to be a micro, so it's going to be something that I guess goes under the kicks. So Nissan's also bringing out the next gen Sentra, and I think that is supposed to be here by the end of the year. And they didn't say much at all about what it's going to be. The Sentra's been around since 2019,
Yes,
and it's ready for an all-new version. We talked about this very recently, how it's one of your personal picks for like an affordable, good compact, because it offers like great value and good size. It's just dull.
Mm-hmm.
But the new, I can't remember if it's the new CEO or someone new that just went high up in Nissan, is saying they need to basically regain some sportiness and some identity, sort of like when Toyota took over Toyota.
Yeah,
which is very, very confusing. And he brought the GRs and the Supra, and there's a Celica coming, and like it's really revived that brand with enthusiasts. So here's hoping we get a rebirth of the SCR, maybe even a Spec V. And I mean, they have a whole host of engines. Like if you want to go Juke 1.3 3-cylinder turbo, there's an SCR. If you want to go crazy and target the Elantra N, drop in the 2-liter from the Altima. Like there's choices out there.
Yeah, just the tough thing is, do they have a manual transmission available for either of those? They probably do somewhere in Europe.
Take it out of the Frontier.
There is no manual in the Frontier.
It's got to be somewhere.
There's got to be somewhere in Europe for the transverse setups.
So before this whole podcast just becomes Nissan, the other thing is they have in financial year 27, so it'll be like a 28 model year, there will be another EV that is built in the US, and this is going to probably be their like Halo EV, probably an SUV. And then quickly flipping to Infiniti, the refreshed QX60 is going to be shown. Surprise, surprise, because the Pathfinder is. It's already got the engine this year, but it's going to get the new styling later. They made a specific point that going forward, they are going to strive harder to make Infinitis differentiate more from Nissans that like share platforms. Okay. And I said in the video, I argued the QX60 was the start of that. There's still a lot of ties, but compared to the old one and the old Pathfinder, I feel more difference.
Yeah.
And their other news is a QX80 Sport is coming out this summer, which if there's a vehicle that needed a sport version, it was definitely that almost 6,000 pound massive SUV. I'm sure it'll just be styling and wheels. And then this
is the Nissan episode.
Yeah. And then the last one is they have a EV coming out sort of when that Nissan time comes, when the Nissan EV comes, and it's going to have to be built in the US, and it's based on their latest concept, which was QXE, I think. No, QE something. It was a car.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah.
But this is going to be an SUV, so it's going to be one of those, an SUV that has the car styling, whatever.
Cool, of course. Okay, fascinating. I hope part of all of those major plans include the Maxima revival.
Yeah. So I just went back to my video, and the quote I used was the 3rd generation e-Power system, the 5-in-1 system with the 1.5 blah blah, will debut in North America in financial year 26 in the next gen Rogue. So that's financial year 26 starts now next year. So within the next 12 to 24 months, this should be here. So
cool.
All right. Well, that was a lot about Nissan, but I mean, it's rare that a
Nissan
company, in fairness to them, everyone knows they're struggling, and they know it, and they know everyone knows. So it's nice for a company to be like, look, this is our product plan, because they always usually keep it really tight, but it's like now they need to deliver.
Yeah. Investors, please pay attention to us. All right.
So moving on, I know we took up a lot of time, but Kyle, you guys drive something pretty fancy.
I did. I finally drove the 2025 Mercedes-Benz E-Class, specifically the 450 4MATIC. So this is the top of the line, if you're not including AMGs. and it is Mercedes midsize sedan. It goes up against the 5 Series and the A6, A7. I don't know what Audi's latest naming convention means
What
anymore.
engines are where? Because this is
Yeah.
the mild hybrid turbo inline, right? The six.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is such a good setup. I love this powertrain. I mean, who does inline sixes better than the Germans? So it's also a pretty handsome looking car. I think there's enough to differentiate it from the C class and the S class now. And in a darker color, like the dark blue that I had, it kind of hides the black outline of the grille, which is kind of controversial in terms of styling. But what I really like about the E450 is that it doesn't try to be a sports sedan. This was one of the smoothest riding cars I have driven in a long time. And I wish I would have driven it when we were still voting on Car of the Year, because it would have been one of my finalists. You turn this car on with the mild hybrid setup, and you don't feel or hear a thing. And not just because mild hybrid. I mean, when the engine kicks on, the only reason you know it's on is because you're watching the digital tack. That's it. My wife thought it was an EV. It floats over bumps despite having pretty big wheels. It was just such a satisfying and calming drive that yeah, I loved it. And I think that this is actually one of the things that we just can't get with modern SUVs. Is like modern SUVs just are not quiet and soft riding, right? They're bouncy and you hear everything because you have a giant opening behind you.
Well, I think you're right, but some nail it, but you have to you go all in on that. Whereas
Yeah.
this would still drive nice. It's good to hear that this is how it drives, because I remember the first time I drove a regular E-Class, we're going back probably 12 years. I think it was a 2013 E350. And same thing, like when I got it, I was like, this is so smooth and so comfortable, yet still drives nice. I was sold. Like, I get why people want these. If you don't need something, a little more on the edge, like a 540, yeah. So it's good to hear that. And that engine, you're right. I've driven it in the GLE and the GLS, and every time I'm surprised at how much power it has for what it is. Like, those big SUVs still move pretty good, and it is so smooth.
Yeah, it's a fantastic car, and I know I talked about the BMW, the 550e recently, the plug-in hybrid, and they're almost exactly the same price, at least how we had them equipped from the press fleet. And yeah, as much as I love the powertrain in the BMW, I think overall this would be the one that I would suggest to people because it's just so comfortable.
And you're right, with the black grille, it looks nice. It is a nice looking front.
Yeah.
So moving on to another car that I got to drive that you've already driven. I spent a week with the Toyota Oh no, right, you haven't driven the auto, have you?
Yeah.
So I spent a week with the GR Corolla Automatic, which for a lot of GR Corolla fans and fanatics is like sacrilege, but it makes sense. I know there's still some manual only cars like the Civic Si, but if you can do it, it makes sense. One of our commentators on the video said like he's happy this is here and he wishes there's more automatic sports cars that are affordably priced, and someone else like listed them all. Like, there are a lot, but I was saying, because he said it'll make it more accessible to people. And I remember specifically talking to Subaru when 2 generations ago, not the current one we have, but the last one came out, and they ditched the hatch,
WRX,
which everyone was like, oh, no WRX hatch, like the car's gonna die, no one cares. But they put in the automatic, and they sold more sedans the first year than sedans and hatches combined the year before, because the auto was there, and their split was about 50-50. So anyway, the car, I'll make this short. So it still has the programmable center differential. It still has torque and diffs front and rear. So
good.
That's unusual. Usually when you get the transmission that's an automatic, you lose that stuff. But the way theirs is set up, unlike Subaru, where the transmission is sort of the differential, they can get away with it because it's up front, routing around. The suspension, the tires, all that's the same. It drives the same when you're tackling corners, and you can get the rear end to step out a bit, trail braking and whatnot. As far as power goes, once you're moving, it's just as quick. Like, it's fun. It's not as frantic because you're not shifting the gears. You're not getting the rocking of the car, because upshifts are actually decently quick. Downshifts are a little slower. It doesn't really roll into gears, but it's not like BMW 8-speed when you do manual mode. It's not like one of the most responsive.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's almost like a DSG the way it shifts, and Chevy's done it for years with the Corvette's automatics too. I mean, they have dual clutch now, but I'm talking C7s. Theirs was always so good, but this isn't like, you're in a minivan that has a manual mode and all it does is let you keep gears.
Yeah, it's
And
not
unlike
like
a lot of
the Camry TRD auto, right? Which is just picking which gears it'll pick from. So okay, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. This one actually, whatever gear you pick, you're in that, unless you slow down too much and it can't stay in it. But if you
Yeah.
hammer the gas, it won't downshift. Yeah, it's not like you're limiting it to a fourth gear if you pick fourth. It's you're in fourth. So
Mhm.
anyway, the bad is the initial power delivery. Because it's an automatic and not a dual clutch, and it wasn't really designed for the car, the torque converter needs to kind of take care of the transmission and the engine. So when you try to launch, it just like rolls in and then the boost picks up and you go. And I think the 0 to 60 times are like a second slower because you can abuse the clutch and just launch this thing, but you can't with the auto. Now, if you don't want to blow your car up, it's probably very similar. But yeah, first gear, if you watch the video, you can see like it takes a second to get going. But then once I get into it, I can just bang through the gears and it's still loud inside and everything else is great. So,
Yeah,
it's
well
a good option. If you don't want manual or don't know how to drive it, this is still fun.
yeah, no one ever like nailed the GTI up on a wall because it had both auto and manual available. It's good. Giving people choice is great.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up. We're way over time, so we're just going to kind of skip
Sorry,
our
everyone.
last story. Yeah, so we'll take a quick break, and I will be back with Greg to talk some new products, and then we'll be back with a special guest, followed by me and Colin talking F1, and then a very quick look at what's ahead. Swapping out your tires? There's nothing like it. With eBay, you'll find the feel you're looking for, from smooth highway rides to grip for rough terrain. Get all the tires you need at prices you'll love. eBay, things people love. All right, we are back, and Greg is once again joining us to talk about some new products and also a few listings that are on AutoGuide. So, how's it going? What are we going to talk about this week?
Hey, Mike, happy Friday. We are going to talk tire gauges. It is spring now, allegedly, and with fluctuating temperatures and uneven roads, there's a good chance your tires might be a little low on their air. So it's a good time to check that out. We've got a nice set of listings here, 7 of them at least, so plenty to choose from. But I kind of like the old standby. I like it's like the pencil setup, iconic, I think you could even call it. And that's the Milton. This is the old school one. You can keep it in your shirt pocket and your coat pocket, and it just works. I like it. That's the one I like to use. I think they're great.
Yeah, I have so many of those. Got them from like every tire event I've ever been to. And it's crazy because it's all just the pressure and the rubber seal. And I find maybe over time they wouldn't be as accurate if they get dusty or dirty. The one I like the most, although I don't have one currently, is the one in the picture here where it's the actual gauge just hooked up to a pipe that goes onto your tire. I usually use the one that's built into my air compressor. Again, I don't know how reliable that is, but it's just I'm blowing up the tire anyway. But basically what I'm trying to say is there's so many different styles and versions out there, but it's good to have something because unless your car tells you the pressure, you can't ever know just by eyeballing it.
I think, yeah, that's a great point. And more modern cars, newer cars, they're very good at letting you know, hey, tire pressure is a little low. Hey, you might want to check it. And you can kind of, reverse engineer what's going on there. And if you need something that's maybe the most precise or the most like easy to read, plenty of digital ones out there in the world. I think that can, that's some people are digital, some people are analog. That's fine. The Astro AI digital tire pressure gauge works great. I've used ones like this from this company. That's fine too. They give you a nice readout. There's no doubt what's going on there. So that's, if that's just who you are, you can do it that way too. Plenty of gauges on here too that I think can work depending on what you might be interested in. The Tire Tech one I think is kind of cool. It's it's old school almost. You hold it and you put it right into the valve stem, and it's definitely a solid choice as well.
All right, well, that's good to hear. Not everyone's car will honk at them when the tire pressure is full, like the Nissans did. But,
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, so go to AutoGuide and check out our list of our recommendations and see for yourself the different styles and price points.
Absolutely. It's a valuable tool.
So moving on to the car of the week, I guess, when it comes to used car listings on AutoGuide. Tell us what we have here.
All right, so we have a 2003 Volkswagen GTI for sale. This is in our listings experience. You can get the newsletter that comes out over the weekend if you want to peruse all the different ones that we curate for you for the week. I think it's a great way to start a weekend with, a cup of coffee and just look at 7 or 8 cars, that are out there, and you can find those in our community forums and have some fun. The one I chose this week is just this generation just hits with me. Maybe it's frankly because I'm of a certain age. Cars around the turn of this century, the body styles, again, they really resonate. So I like the 2003 GTI. This one it's out there. The pictures are pretty good. It's in Texas, reasonable price, about $6,800. It's got the VR6 24 valve engine. They say 76,000 original miles on it, so you can check it out. You get the manual transmission. The interior looks like it's in decent shape. Again, I make no, claims to the verification of these, but we just look at these and try to pick cool ones. 6-speed manual, 1 owner, which was garage kept for over a decade. Looks pretty good. This generation of the GTI really just kind of hits with me. This one, it's a hatch setup with the big wheels, and you kind of saw Volkswagen try to maintain some of the ethos of this car through later generations of the GTI, which I think is a great thing. The GTI is always one of my most favorite cars, as I think it is for most enthusiasts.
Yeah, excuse me. This body style too, it's the one for me that I think of when I think GTI, because we're both not old enough for the old square Mark 1 and 2. So this was the one that I saw people driving and buying, and I didn't like it. I didn't like what it was about at first, in the sense the 1.5 turbo and the 2.8 VR6 both made, I think, like 150 horsepower, and it just seemed not enough for how good the car was. But by the end, I think this is actually the last year of it. Power was on the way up, and I mean, it was always underrated anyway. And this has I don't know if those are the stock wheels it came with, but those were on the R32 and those were on the anniversary editions. Maybe by 03 it was an option anyway, but it's got the right look for sure.
Yeah, I remember people driving these, like young people, like maybe they got one, like a lightly used one, or they even maybe, I don't know, right out of school you would finance a car like this. And I mean, they were fun daily drivers. I remember I played on a softball team with a guy who had one of these, and he really enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty cool. And I was in press cars, and he was driving a car like this, and we were both kind of jealous of the other's rides. So, yeah, very cool generation of GTI.
And the generation that followed, I was never a fan of that sort of. It didn't have the sort of flat front that the GTA should have, where the headlights kind of slid back with the hood line. The Jetta too, and then they both fix that for the next gen. But anyway, thanks for joining us. Next week, you'll be back. I probably won't be, because I'll just explain later in the podcast where I'll be. But I'll definitely see you in 2 weeks then.
All right, Mike. Safe travels.
All right, see ya.
Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can handle, you start to think to yourself, you know what, I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks and struts, and this baby deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there, it's unreal. From wipers and headlights to cold air intakes, exhaust systems, and even that turbo you've had on your mind. eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. Because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major, and mods are always intense, so you need to know that these parts guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And in the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back, simple as that. You know what you love more than the car itself is driving it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance, and you're locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info and get the exact parts that fit. When you see the green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. So now that you know all that, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at your car you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible. Whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love.
And welcome back to the AutoGuide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. This week's special guest is someone that you've probably heard talking over one of the racing series that you watch, or maybe even playing your favorite video game. He also, in his spare time, buys a bunch of cars that we're all pretty jealous of. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Much appreciated. My name is Tom Brooks. I am a motorsports commentator, currently working as the voice of the Gran Turismo video games, also as the TV commentator for things like Formula E and stuff on the British Superbike Championship as well.
So, a man wearing many hats.
Exactly that, yeah. Sometimes I wonder which hat to wear on each given day.
Yeah. Well, so Tom, I've known you for a pretty long time now, mostly through Gran Turismo. But one of the questions that we always ask every guest that comes onto the show is, what got you started in cars?
What got me started in cars was my dad. So my dad is a mechanic, and ever since I was a kid, I could just remember going, because my parents split when I was quite young, so I used to go around to see my dad on the weekend, and he would be working on a car, and there would be bits of engine over the kitchen table or whatever it would happen to be. And then, you know how it's the passage of time doesn't really exist when you're a child. When I was a kid, like, I remember going around, he had this Triumph GT6 that was sat on the driveway, and it was in a complete state. And then one week I turned up and it was completely finished, and he'd done everything to it. So like, cars were ingrained in me from a young age. One of the photos I've got of myself and my two sisters is of me, and I'm holding a toy car. So I've always loved it. I remember when I was a kid, I could go around and I could name each car, like, that's a Toyota, that's a Honda, that's a, Chevrolet, or whatever it would happen to be. So it's always been something that's ingrained in me, and it came from my father and also probably my grandfather as well, because I used to watch Formula One with him when I was a kid. So it's always been there, and it's just something that I probably couldn't really imagine my life without.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a pretty common thread for a lot of us. I mean, Mike and I included, right? It's like, you can't really picture where you would be without it, even though I think we've all agreed too that no one really planned to do what we end up doing currently. Like, did you plan when you were a kid? Did you plan on being a racing commentator?
No, not at all. No, when I was a kid, I wanted to do my dad's job. I wanted to be a mechanic. And then once I'd stripped the thread for a spark plug, putting my moped back together when I was about 14, I realized that job probably wasn't going to be something that was going to pay the bills for me, because my dad is incredible. He's got the ability to go and look at a car. And I remember he had a Porsche 911 when I was about 11 or 12, a 964 Carrera 4 Targa, and it was just the nuts. But at the time, no one wanted them, so they were cheap as anything. And he bought this one that had engine damage. So he was ripping this engine out one day and just throwing things onto the bench behind him, oil lines and bits of the head and whatever, camshafts and stuff, and then just not looking where anything went, and then put it back together with the accuracy of a Swiss chronograph 2 days later. He just has that natural ability to do that. And so being a motorsports commentator was something that I never planned to do, but I wanted to do something in cars or bikes or motorsport or whatever, because I knew that was going to happen for me, because it was just ingrained in me. It was in my veins, really. But yeah, that came about, to be honest, a lot later. I was 13 when I started doing radio. So I was at high school at the time, and we were doing an IT project. And as part of this IT project, we had to make an advert for the radio. And I'm quite competitive by my nature. So I went down to the radio station and I chatted to the people involved. And I was quite fortunate that my voice dropped at a young age. And just to set the scene, so I'm 13. I had long black hair. I played guitar. I was in a band. I was going to be, the next Dave Murray from Iron Maiden or something like that. That was going to be me. And then I went into this radio station and I just fell in love basically straight away. And they trained me up to do a show. And I did that for a few years, doing various different evening shows and then daytime shows. And so I was still at high school at the time. And when I was about 16, I was thinking, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go for a living? And as I said, cars, bikes, always been there for me. And then I was using my voice a lot. So I thought, well, if I can use my voice, then maybe I could try doing motorsports commentary. I'll give it a go. I'll give it 2 years and I'll see if it works out. And obviously we're sat here now having this conversation. What's that? 11 years later, 12 years later now. So it's fortunately, it's worked out for the best.
Where do you start doing that? Like, how do you just suddenly start commentating on races? Did you just do it on your own and someone noticed, or did you see an opening?
So I always raced, like I always did sim racing. You know, Gran Turismo 5 was like my game when I was a teenager. I remember waiting for that to come out, and then it was delayed, and waiting for it to come out some more, and then it was delayed. And I was like waiting for it to come out. I was like, come on, it's got to come out at some point. And so I was like 13 when it was released, and I played that game cover to cover. You know, I could tell you everything about it back to front because it was just the one for me. That was like the zenith. You know, I'd grown up playing GT3 and GT4, but GT5 was like the one that solidified my interest in sim racing. So I joined GT Planet when I was about 13 or 14 and started doing sim racing on the weekends because what else do you do when you're a teenager? Aside from, you know, I don't know, going out with your friends and stuff like that. I didn't have friends because I did radio, right? So I basically started sim racing, and one day there was a race happening, and we were just in the lobby, and they were like, "Oh, it'd be cool if we had some commentary over this." And I was like, "Well, I do some radio. I'll give it a go." So I just started commentating, and someone said, "Oh, that was kind of good. Maybe you should think about that." I was probably about 14 at the time, and didn't really think much of it. It didn't really go anywhere. So fast forward to when I'm 16 and I'm kind of deciding that I want to maybe pursue this idea of motorsports commentary because it was something I flirted with a few years before. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. So I went into the radio studio and found a video of Michael Schumacher doing a lap at Catalonia. And I just stuck the microphone up, hit record. And I thought, well, whatever comes out of my mouth, and I'll just commentate on that lap. So I did it. I stuck it on my Facebook, like my personal Facebook page, and some friends were like, and my nan and my mum were like, "Oh, this is great. Maybe you should do some more of this sort of stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I did some more, and I did some more, and I was like, oh, maybe there's something in this. Maybe I can make a living from talking about cars and bikes and shouting about inanimate objects going around in circles. I went to the Autosport Show, which, for those who aren't aware, is a big motorsport show that happens at the start of every year in January up in Birmingham. So I got media accreditation through the radio station, and I went up there and just interviewed anybody that I could, you know, drivers, team managers, the doorman, anybody that I could talk to that would give me a conversation. I did. So I went there and I met people, and I made these DVD show reels, and I handed them out to different commentators. And the only guy that got back to me was actually David Croft, who, as I'm sure everybody knows, is the Sky F1 commentator. And he came back and gave me some feedback, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, maybe there's something in this. Great. So yeah, I just had to build my network of contacts up and hope for the best, really.
I also want to point out, I'm very happy to hear you give Gran Turismo 5 praise, because so many people say it's the worst one in the franchise, and I always loved 5.
I just love the different challenges, you know, you had on there as well, with like the Jeff Gordon NASCAR thing, and like the, you know, the used car dealership. Obviously, there are so many cars in GT5. I mean, I'm still trying to work out how many different models of UNOS or MX5 there actually are, to be honest. But yeah, it was just my jam. So yeah, I will die on the hill that GT5 is the one for me. You know, that the kids born between 97 and 2000, that's probably their game as well. So
yeah, I get that. I'm still a solid GT3 supporter, but I understand.
Hey, I mean, yeah, I love GT3 as well, though. You know, because you turn that on and immediately you've got Feeder playing, and it's just like, my God, that is just so much fun, isn't it?
I was just going to say, we've talked so much about Gran Turismo, but we haven't really talked about how you got involved with it.
2016, I had done some stuff for GT Planet, working for the Endurance Series, and that was kind of the thing I did on the weekend. So when my friends were all going out to wild parties and getting drunk, I was spending evenings in with my mum and commentating on Gran Turismo. Not with my mum commentating on Gran Turismo, but just to clarify. So yeah, we would. So I'd commentate on that, and anyway. So Jordan from GT Planet, who I've known for a good while, I interviewed him when I was on the radio when I was about 15, 16, and we kind of stayed in semi-regular contact, started doing the endurance stuff on GT5 and then latterly on GT6. And I got invited over to the GT Sport unveiling event at the Copper Box. And they said, you know, it's like, one day we want you there. We're just going to make like a YouTube video diary. Could you front it for us? Yeah, fine. Okay, no worries. So I decided to do that. And whilst I was there, they had all these sim rigs on a stage, massive auditorium, but it was kind of just open to media on that day. The day before, they'd had an actual audience there, and proper commentators and stuff. But I got chatting to a guy who was on stage, a guy called Rupert, and I said to him, look, have you got a commentator for these races that are happening this afternoon? And he said, well, no, we haven't. We had, I think it was Ben Edwards here yesterday, and Jordan was here and stuff, but we haven't got anybody today. I was like, okay, well, look, I do some stuff for GT Planet, so I know Gran Turismo. If you're interested, I'll do it for you this afternoon. I'm only making this video. And they said, think about it. Okay. And they went away, came back 5 minutes later and said, yeah, here's a microphone, here's some paperwork. Off you go. Okay, all right. So I went off for 3 hours commentating on GT Sport, which was first time I'd ever seen that game, and just shouting about the racing. And fortunately, Kazunori Yamauchi, who for those who don't know is the producer, the founding father of Gran Turismo, he really liked what I did, and that's kind of how that relationship began, really. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history.
And now tens of millions of people around the world have heard you tell them what sportsmanship is all about.
And I am sure they are much wiser for it, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to do what I do with Gran Turismo. It's so interesting how it kind of came about by chance, really, and had I not been in the right place at the right time on that specific day with those people there, I think sometimes life has a way of navigating you through these different paths. And I think wherever you are in life is kind of wherever you're supposed to be. So if you're in a good place, it's great, but you've got to kind of reflect on how you got there. If you're in a particularly bad place, then that's really tough and it's difficult. But I think it's important to realize that the bad does always get better, and to realize kind of you look back and you think, well, I went through the terrible stuff here to get through to the good stuff. So I think that's one thing that I always try and do is just kind of reflect on these things. So again, right place, right time for the GT story. And yeah, very, very lucky to kind of do what we do nowadays.
It's great to see someone so passionate about a series and basically keep it going this long.
I just love what I do, talking about things, talking about racing, communicating that and telling a story to an audience is what I love and what I've always known, really. And it's that drives me forward. I never wake up thinking, God, I wish I was doing something else, And I think that when you look at Kaz and Gran Turismo, his passion for the series is completely unbreakable. He's been there ever since the beginning. 94 was sort of the first inklings of when Gran Turismo came to the public eye with Motortune, and then obviously when GT1 was released, and that took a massive amount of effort from him and the team. And a lot of people that were involved in Gran Turismo 1 back in 97 is still there. And I think that speaks volumes that the team at Polyphony, everyone, I think, kind of from the outside looks at it and thinks it's this huge franchise and it must be a massive team. But actually, it's a lot smaller, a lot more intimate than you might realize, because Gran Turismo and Kaz and the team there, they all have such an innate way of working together and understanding each other. And it's all about trust, knowing that you've got a person that can go there and they can deliver on that job. So things might take a little bit longer to get produced or end up in the game or whatever it may happen to be. But numbers wise, compared to some other developers, the resources are actually quite small. So it's one of those where I look at it, and it's the reason that all of these people do what they do and have done it for that longevity is down to the passion and the drive that they all share with one another.
What else is in the Tom Brooks garage these days? And as a question after that, is there anything that you might have regretted getting rid of?
Yeah, there's definitely a few regrets. There's a few things I've regretted buying, to be honest, given how much they've ended up ruining my bank account as well. So what's in the garage at the moment, as we've spoken about, I've got an Audi R8. It's a V10 manual Gen 1. So super rare sort of car. Didn't plan to buy one. I actually planned to buy a V8. I had one of those a few years ago, and it turned into a nightmare. I took that original car to a specialist. They looked over it and said, yeah, it's going to be 15 grand to fix it. And I was like, yeah, I'm probably better off selling this. So I got rid of it. And then I got a Porsche Cayman GT4, which was lovely, but costing me more than my mortgage every month. And I was like, it's not really worth having this. Anyway, I then decided to buy an Audi R8 again because I just missed my original one and I wanted to buy a good one. And I set a budget. I was like, right, well, if I spend about, this much money, I'll go and buy one of these. And a V10 manual came up really cheap when I was just looking through Auto Trader idly one day. And I was like, that's got to be a misprint. I'll phone them. And I phoned them. I said, is that the price? It's like 10,000 cheaper than any other V10 manual on the market. Yeah, no, that's the price. I was like, well, I'm going to come and down and look at it today. So I went down and I looked at it and I bought it. And, it has partially financially ruined me, but it's a V10 manual Audi R8. And, you're not going to find another one of those because they only made a very select number, so they're very rare. So I've got that in my garage at the moment. What else have I got? I have got Tesla is my daily because I do a fair few motorway miles, and the EV charging is quite useful. It's good for going into London and all that sort of stuff. That being said, I won't be getting another EV anytime soon. I went away for my birthday a fortnight ago, and wonderful though it is, unfortunately, the infrastructure in certain parts of the UK just still isn't quite where it needed to be. And I lost like 3 hours of my time, unfortunately, trying to plug in and charge. And it was just like, do you know what? I could have just gone to a fuel station and filled this up and been done within 5 minutes. So for my circumstances, nothing against the technology. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's definitely going to come a long way in the next few years. But for me, I need the infrastructure to be different. But that's the car I use day to day. And actually, as a car, I quite like it because it's just comfortable, it's easy, and it's nice to drive. You can have a conversation. It's quite civilized. But yeah, one, I'd say infrastructure, and two, also, not wanting to get too political or anything like that. I've got to be careful about how I play this, but I don't want to be associated with certain members of the United States government, shall we say?
No.
Anyway, so
it's okay. We say Elon's crazy. It's fine.
Oh, okay, good. I've seen people with bumper stickers saying I got this car before Elon went crazy, and
there's two in my neighborhood.
Oh, good. Maybe I should invest in one of those. But that's my daily. What else do we have at the moment? It's terrible when you have to think about it. I've got a Transit custom camper van, which I use for racing. So I just hook my trailer up on the back of it, and it's got like a rock and roll bed in it and a little fridge and stuff. So I'll just, be going away next week, actually going to race with my dad. We'll be driving up about 5 hours to get to the racetrack, and that'll be quite nice because I can just stay there overnight with the car and stuff. So yeah, I've got that. I've got a Mark II Golf that we're restoring at the moment. That's a 8-valve GTI 1990. Really good car, but it's turned into a complete disaster of a rebuild because everything I touch seems to do that. Because every car I buy, you look at it and you think, oh, that doesn't look too bad, and then you peel away at the bodywork and you think, oh, that's had some filler in it, or there's some rust under there that was hidden under some underseal, and so on. So that's an ongoing project at the moment. I've got a Porsche 944, 1985, I think it is, in God's Red. That was a complete childhood buy because my dad had one when I was a kid. So I mentioned earlier on, my parents divorced when I was quite young. And when my dad used to pick me up and I'd go and see him on the weekends, he picked me up in a God's Red Porsche 944, square dashboard, like black cloth seats with like white lines going down them, proper 80s mobile. And I loved that car. And I made a promise to myself that I'd buy one day. And I was just, again, idly looking through eBay or Auto Trader or something. And I was like, there's a Porsche 944 in God's Red. Hey, same interior. Oh, same dashboard. Same year. Well, I'm going to go and look at that. So I went and looked at it and I bought it. So that's now sat in a storage unit. It's the next project we're going to work on after the Mark II GTI is done. And this week I've just bought a Mark V Golf GTI, actually. Because I have no patience when it comes to things. No, basically, because I've decided that I'm going to be getting rid of the Tesla because it's on a lease deal and it goes back soon anyway. I wanted to replace it with something that was quite cheap. I'm doing a lot of motorway miles, traveling up and down the country for work. And I just thought there's no point me buying something super expensive. I might as well buy something that I can just enjoy and put some miles on. And it's quite fun to drive in. And I've always loved a hot hatch. I've had so many hot hatches. So I decided to buy a Mark V Golf GTI and I bought it for £500. So you can imagine what it looks like. We got it up on the ramp earlier this afternoon and Dad was going around poking a screwdriver through the sills. And I was like, okay, well, they maybe need doing. It needs some paint on it. It's got a leak from the oil pump's gone. So yeah, anyway, look, it was 500 quid. If it breaks, I'll just rip the interior out and I'll sell it and it doesn't matter. If we fix it, it's going to cost me probably about 1,500 quid and it will be one of those beaters that you can just drive around forever until the door falls off. And then you just stick the door on with gaffer tape and get on with it, So yeah, that's what I've got in my fleet at the moment.
That's comprehensive.
Yeah. Sorry, I've had quite a few cars. It's funny because I have to really go back and think, have I had that? Yeah, when did I have that? I had that here. And then, some people make a list and they know the registrations. I'm not like that. I've just got it in my head, kind of buried somewhere behind some obscure commentary notes about, a motorcycle rider that I commentated on 10 years ago. And it's kind of buried in there and I have to really dig deep to try and find it,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I like hearing lists like that of vehicles because that's if I had the space is what I would do. I'd have just random things from all over the place because I just like so many cars, and that's why I'm kind of happy I don't because I would be absolutely financially ruined decades ago just in these cars. I'd probably be sleeping in some weird obscure Japanese car that I imported, but
In the nicest SVX you could possibly find.
exactly. I will have one again. I will.
I have to
One
say
day.
though, it is cheaper to have a car addiction on Gran Turismo. Let's be honest, and also cheaper if you cock it up. You know, you make a mistake and you put the wrong suspension on it or something, and you think, oh, you know, maybe I've ruined that a little bit. I did that with a Honda S2000 I had a few years ago, and I basically did a series on YouTube where I built the car on Gran Turismo, set a lap time at Brands Hatch, and then did the same things to the car in real life, and then tried to beat my lap time at Brands Hatch, a bit like Jeremy Clarkson did on that episode of Top Gear years ago, which culminated in me ending up in the gravel at Paddock Hill Bend after about 5 laps because I'd forgotten to adjust the tyre pressures once it got hot. Yeah, which wasn't my finest hour. And then I was driving on the road and I put coilovers on it to help it be more compliant around the racetrack. And it was great on the racetrack. On the road, it was absolutely horrendous. It was so harsh, especially with the quality of roads that we have in the UK. Yeah, that was. I sold that car, and whilst I loved the S2000, I loved the VTEC, and I loved the whole experience of top-down motoring. I don't miss driving that on a regular basis because my spine was just in tatters after a half an hour drive.
I mean, who hasn't ruined a car by trying to upgrade it and making it too extreme? I've been there. Did it to an I don't know if you got them, the Saab 92X, the WRXs that were rebadged as Saabs.
Oh no, but I want one of those because I love the WRXs, and then you see the Saab and you're just like, that's cool. And it's the sort of car that you would, if I was walking through a car park, I would see that and I would be like, that's cool. And the person that drives that knows that that's cool. You know, and it's just like that little thing you have where you're like, yeah, you know that's cool. I know that's cool. We've got that little thing, you know. Doris, who's going shopping, walks past it, says, "Oh, it's just a Saab." No, not a clue.
Just an old wagon. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Some old wagon. Yeah, but I had a leaky strut when I bought it, so I'm like, I'm gonna buy some coilovers, and I got them through a car forum used and put them on, and it's like, oh, it sits great, no more sag. And I started driving it. And I was like, this is a terrible idea because like I could feel every pebble on the road. It was so harsh, but you know, you live, you learn.
I'm a bit disappointed for me because I never got to do the whole like teenager modifying car sort of scene. So I moved to Spain when I was 19 to work in bike racing actually, and I never had a car out there because I lived in Barcelona. I didn't need a car. It wasn't necessary. I had a motorbike to get to and from work. So I never got to do that kind of buy a crappy MX-5, fit the cheapest coilovers from eBay on it, you know, and just see what comes of it. By the time I moved back to the UK, I decided that I needed to be a bit sensible, and I bought a Hyundai i30N, which was one of my favorite cars I've ever owned. But yeah, I never did that kind of whole modifying and ruining thing. I'm kind of doing it now, but not by, you know, it's one of those where I'm not buying the cheapest coilovers. I'm actually buying kind of nice coilovers, but then realizing that actually it's going to have an adverse effect on the ride, you know, and I'm going to ruin it. So
never too late to start. I didn't get my first car until I was 23, and it was an Alero, which I know you didn't get. And I did way too many mods to it for what the car was and wasted so much money. And then it got written off, not my fault. And I lost all that money. So yeah.
Yeah, but it was yours though. It was yours though.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Is it's like, it's unique to you. And it's like, when you've got an old house, you know how to kick the back door in a certain way, right? In the same way that when you've got a crappy old car or a car that you've modified to make your own, you know how to drive it, to nurse it, to get it that little bit further. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier on about being that extension of you, that extension of your personality. And I just think that that's such a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, if you don't have anything else, we should probably let Tom go. It's been pretty long.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you know, I think that's actually a pretty good note to end on, is the extension of our personalities is Tom brings his personality to all these various aspects of his life, and then people can enjoy that. So before we sign off, first, Tom, thanks for your time. But where can people find you? Just plug whatever you want now for a few seconds.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Tom Brooks Comms, COMMS for comms. I'm on X or whatever it's called this week. I'm on Facebook as well. I also do a bit of YouTube as well. And so I do this with my dad. So my dad, as I said, is a mechanic. We now work together fixing and restoring cars. So we've done things like an Alfa Romeo 147 GTA. We did a race car together. We're doing the Mark II Golf at the moment. We've done a Porsche Boxster and so on. And basically, I just buy a car and I say to him, yeah, go and fix it. And then he goes and fixes it. And you can find us on YouTube. We make videos, put probably 1 to 2 videos out a month over the course of this year. It's youtube.com/Tom Brooks Media. You can find us all on there. There's plenty of content to hopefully keep you entertained. And if it doesn't keep you entertained, then watch it when you need to go to bed, and you can use it as a little lullaby.
That
sounds good.
Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks so much for being on with us, and have fun at the Nürburgring this weekend.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Mike, Carl. It's really been a joy to sit here talking nonsense. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. If you're listening at home or in the car or wherever it is as well, and it's just nice to be able to sit here and chat about cars and share our passions with one another. What a joy!
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks again, Tom.
All right. Thanks. Hello and welcome back. We have Colum Wood joining us again for the F1 updates and rumors, and it is an off week, so we don't have to worry about talking about something that hasn't happened yet. But it's been pretty news heavy for a random off week. What, 2 races into the season?
Yeah, and I feel like just what you mentioned there about it being a things that haven't happened yet. All week long, it was the Lawson getting axed was the thing that hasn't happened yet, and now it's actually happened. So crazy that finally, Yuki's going to get a shot, I guess, at long last. It's we'll see how he does, right? Like, it's this Red Bull just seems like a gong show. I really thought, like, I knew Lawson was doing terrible. It was obvious it was not going well, but I still thought they'd give him half a season, right? Like, summer break, make a switch, but 2 races in, and they're getting like more ruthless, not less ruthless as it goes on. So
yeah, like I didn't think they could make it to summer break because they're clearly worried about manufacturers because of the money you get. And if they waited to summer, they would be 4th at best, probably, unless Ferrari keeps getting themselves in trouble. We'll talk about that later. But it's like you said, every time someone gets in that seat and they get kicked out, you feel bad for them. Like, you felt bad for Gasly, and then all year last year, like, oh, Sainz or Checo just can't get a break. And now Lawson gets 2.5 races if you count the sprint, where he qualified last twice, crashed once, kind of artificially finished high in the Chinese Grand Prix because 3 people DQ'd themselves. But poor guy. I hope he goes to Running Bulls and gets in the points, just to show, like, you have this, like, the max setup for the car. They need to change it for the secondary driver, and it just seems
they need like a different car. Like everyone's joking that, like, they should make Max drive the RB just to see how that does, or like I think it's a real question. Like, where's Yuki going to wind up in this race? Like, will he be able to do okay? Is he going to like pull someone out of the bag and all of a sudden he's like 5th or 6th, and you're like, oh, this is amazing, it finally all worked out? Or is he going to be 18th or something? Like, are we going to have to see the same problems with him? It seems likely, like, the number of drivers that have just I should say that, but like, both Albon and Gasly weren't, maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like they weren't terrible, right? Like, they just weren't good enough at the time when they expected, like, when Max was clearly number 1, they were expecting like a number 2 or a 3 or 4. And when these guys are finishing like 6, you're like, that's terrible. I mean, Red Bull would be thrilled with 6th right now, right? If they could get a driver who could pull off a 6th place finish, they'd be like, it's wild.
I think that's it. Is when Ricciardo was there and Verstappen kind of overtook him, it was like, we have 1-2, and their car was so dominant compared to everyone else during the years of Albon and Gasly. Like, they expected we should be 1-2 because Max is so far ahead. Yeah, and it's just getting worse and worse. And with the current situation, I mean, Yuki couldn't be set up any better, but it's also going to be huge pressure because it's home track, which you should know. He's got a Red Bull car, but I've seen 2 comments on what's happening. I think it's somewhere in the middle. Some people say the car is too set up for Max, like, on the nose, and that's why no one else can drive it, and maybe Yuki will be okay because he likes to be aggressive. And then the other story is the Red Bull may just be that bad now, but Max is such a good driver, he can deal with what he's got.
Yeah, he's driving a turd around, right? So I think we will know more to that answer after this weekend, a little bit anyway. So
I mean, ask Max in these races, and he's calling it a turd over and over again and saying
he has been. He's very like the last race, and they said, "What do you need to do to finish? To be on the podium?" And he said, "All the drivers in front need to be, basically crash out." That's basically it. So
well, Ferrari tried to help, so
they sure did. Oh my goodness,
Ferrari, new boss, new driver. Same old Ferrari making it'd be one thing if both your cars are DQ'd for one mistake across the board, but to have two separate like miscalculations is just how does that happen?
It is. Well, and I feel like the last time we had one of these like the floorboard things, I feel like it was the Austin GP, and it was also a sprint race weekend. So it's like there seems to be an issue with they run the same floor, right? And so the same plank is getting extra worn because you're wearing it over more race, right? But still, like these are, the money and the engineering that goes into this. Those are mistakes that shouldn't happen. We always, my wife and I, we watch Formula. We always joke. There was, I don't think it's the current guy it was Leclerc's old race engineer, and he always said that we are checking. It doesn't matter what year it was. They're always like, and so we say that now. Every time something's going on, it's like, oh, we are checking. They're never actually doing anything. They're just like, oh crap, what are we supposed to do here? So Ferrari's
like you were saying about the plant, because Leclerc was less than a kilogram over, which is like, it didn't probably affect his performance too much, but it's just, and people are like, why so much money to Ferrari? And it's not because they were thought to be cheating so aggressively. It's FIA doesn't want to have to deal with this. So if someone is caught, it's like, come on, you're so close. But the plank thing you're talking about, it was actually 2 years ago, I think. And it was Hamilton and Leclerc both got DQ'd for planks, Mercedes and Ferrari. And then it's the two of them. I mean, only one of them planked, but maybe there's a way Hamilton drives that has he aggressively scrubs the plank. I don't know if they can change it between sprint and race. I assume no. But
yeah, I assume no too. So, but just if you know that, then you'd know to basically add a little more, like, plank or figure out a solution. Maybe you have to raise the ride height a tiny bit, right? It's weird.
But yeah, I mean, we were talking about Red Bull and firing a second driver. I mean, Ferrari right now is, I think they're behind quite a few teams. I think Williams even in points, like, because they didn't have a great first week with Hamilton, and then this week they got nothing because of the DQs. So it's not starting out great for them, but they have pace. Mercedes has pace. McLaren has pace. Just Verstappen has pace. So yeah, it'll still be interesting. I mean, they had 4 different cars in the top 4 for a while this week, which was awesome to see.
It's very entertaining, and it means that, like, when the guys start pushing and jockeying, lots can go right or wrong. And I'm just looking. I pulled up the the current standings, right, and it's like. You've got Norris, then Verstappen, Russell, Piastri, but like Kimi Antonelli, he's 5th. He's a rookie. That's wild. You've got Albon in a Williams. He's 6th. And then Ocon is 7th overall, and Stroll is 8th. Like, and so Hamilton's 9th, and Leclerc is 10th right now. So if you had told somebody after basically 2.5 races in the season, these would be the results, they'd be like, no, that's not right.
Stroll is quietly putting together a pretty good start to his season. He's outraced Alonso twice. I mean, Alonso didn't finish one race, but he's been in the points decently both times. It's funny because a friend in the F1 fantasy pool I'm in took Stroll just as like sort of the filler when you need less points, and I was like, why him? And he's laughing now because his team's doing great because this guy that was expected to get nothing's getting great points for him.
Yeah, when your backbencher's like picking up good points, it's good.
And it's not like Behrman, who got the points last week because of the DQs. Like, he's not competing in the top 3-4 teams, but he's solidly there, which shows that Aston's turned things around a bit. It's almost like Aston got someone to develop their car that used to be at Red Bull. There's a reason the teams are going opposite directions.
They haven't even started. I knew I don't know if there's much impact Newey could have already, but you never know. I see you've got Colapinto up there. I was going to mention on the rumors front, different things going around. So I guess of all this changes at Racing Bulls and Red Bull, etc., that apparently there's an article that Red Bull actually tried to get Albon back in the off season, which again would like move things around. That didn't happen. And then also that there's new rumors that VCAR, whatever, Racing Bulls, etc., wanted Colapinto for this year, but that just didn't work out because of the way things moved. And then there was a Ralph Schumacher interview where he basically said that Horner actually wanted Colapinto in the Red Bull this year. I do think that maybe that was if you recall last season, like he showed up on the scene and he was doing awesome, and then he proceeded to do a whole bunch of crazy crashes, right? And he replaced Sargent, so like everybody looks like a superstar next to Sargent coming in. And Colapinto looked amazing for a short period of time, but then he also had a whole bunch of crashes. So rookies always will, I guess, in a sense, but very. Still seems like a risky move. So
well, he didn't gain any favors with the racers he's competing with. A lot of them had issue with him. So that sounds like a perfect teammate for Verstappen. just put them side by side. But Albon, fantastic decision for him to stay where he is, because he's got a team kind of coming back to life. He's doing well, and I don't know how that Red Bull is, and he might not be doing as well in that right now, which is crazy to say. Like, good thing you're in a Williams instead of a Red Bull. Like, who would have thought that a year or two ago?
Exactly. Yeah, it's well, and he's really making Sainz look bad as well. I saw some rumors online about how apparently it was a very confusing rumor that first it sounded like Sainz had an old chassis for Williams, but apparently it's really that both of the chassis are old, and Williams is basically reusing a bunch of parts for this year. And I'm like, well, I bet a lot of people are. So they don't want to invest too much. So although, yeah, Williams seems to be, they've got like some big fancy new sponsors and they're putting everything together. They're the dark horse of the season, and it's just nice to see it happening, right? If Sainz can get a little bit better, like they might be ahead of Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship by the end of the year if Red Bull doesn't figure this out.
Which would be great for the sport. You figured things would get a little closer because this is the last year of the regulations and everyone's kind of copied each other and should have it figured out. And that's kind of what's happening. And then the next year is going to be fun too. So we're going a bit long here, so let's just get to the final story before I let you go. So
hilarious.
What's up with this jacket? For those listening, there's a jacket on a rack that I'm not really sure. It's BWT colors, but what is it?
Yeah. So this is if you look in the bottom right corner, it's a Racing Point jacket. So this is just a super random thing. If people don't know, Mike and I are based in Canada, and the Bay, which is like a department store of eras gone by. It's running out of business. Yeah, exactly. I wandered through one of the mall on the weekend when it was shutting down and they had sales on everything, and then I saw this whole Formula One collection of clothes, and annoyingly none of that was on sale. But then I was like, oh, look at all these different shirts and whatever else, and I was like, oh my goodness, they have a Racing Point like jacket for sale. Like, Racing Point hasn't been a team for quite a few years, so this has been sitting in the inventory. Either this has been sitting on a shelf, and that shows you how few people shop at the Bay, or it's been sitting in some back warehouse and they just wanted to try and move it. But I saw that and I'm like, that's hilarious.
Yeah, they're probably just finding everything that they had stored in the back. It's like, okay, try to get rid of this. Because Racing Point, and they weren't around long.
No. I almost want to buy it as like just a novelty item, to be like, hey, look at the little piece of history I found on sale.
Yeah, because that was right before they switched. So I think it was a year and a half, 2 years maybe, that they're Racing Point. I can't remember exactly when they had to become Racing Point because the old team had some financial issues.
Yeah, Force India, and they moved on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very cool. Maybe I'll have to go pick that up.
Maybe it's on sale today. Maybe they knocked it down. It's like 80% off or something. If it was, that might be funny to own just for the sake of it.
I have to go to my local Bay and take a look.
Yeah. We'll chat, I'm sure, next week, and
it'll be right before the Japanese Grand Prix starts. We'll be all ready to go.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'll make my prediction ahead of time that Yuki finishes 7th.
All right,
that's my bold prediction.
I'll have to think more where I'm going to place them, but I do agree in the points. I'm just not sure where.
Good stuff. All right.
Well, we'll talk to you soon and see what happens the next week before the racing gets back.
Yeah, more rumors, I'm sure.
All right. See ya. All right. So if you're still with us after this long, thank you. We won't take much time here. So just looking ahead, next week, I will be off. Oh, I won't be off. I'll be working. I'll be in another continent. So Kyle will be back probably with Greg doing the podcast, and I'll be back in 2 weeks. I won't be driving anything next week. I'll be at the Seoul Auto Show in Korea. Kyle, what are you going to be doing quickly?
Well, I mean, first off, I am with a different background here. I am in Puerto Rico driving a new vehicle, which you'll hear about the day after this podcast goes live. Next week, I don't have a car either, but I will be going to San Diego to drive the updated Ford Maverick and Ford Bronco Sport, which I'm really excited about because I love the Maverick. And the Bronco Sport gets this new off-roady trim, which should be fun. So yeah, it'll be lots of new stuff for us next week.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the AutoGuide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. And until next week, which we promise will be shorter, we'll see you then.
So long, everybody.
Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need, at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love.